What is up, everybody? It is episode 54, Party of Slave Podcast. It is Anthony here. I'm joined by the one, I guess it's one and two only, Tony and Nate. What's going on, fellas?
I look forward to this every week. Just sit here with you guys and nerd out on some cool stuff. We got some cool stuff tonight.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you, Anthony?
Very formal. No, I'm doing great, man. I don't watch like TV series in real time. Like, you know how people like kind of base their lives around sitting down on like a Tuesday to watch a show? I don't do that. I do this. This is what I do. Mm-hmm. This is what we do.
Definitely. I'm all in on this, especially now it's streaming. I can catch up on it tomorrow or the next day. I'd rather nerd with you guys.
The show must go on. So, yeah, check us out on...
Speaking of that... Oh, wait. The show? Oh. The shows? All right, go ahead. Give the socials first, then we'll talk about shows.
Yeah, social media. You guys ever hear of it? Social media, we're on all those platforms, at Patio Slave, Twitter and Instagram. And we always plug the emails. We love getting those. The special packages, gift wrapped on your doorstep. We'll take them in digital form. Patio Slave Podcast at gmail.com. Hit us up there. What else are we on? Are we on anything else?
www.patioslave.com, and you can get links to any specific way you want to listen to the podcast, or if you're feeling kind of like I want a little visual with my podcast, you can go to YouTube. Our YouTube link is there, and we have everything either cut up into bite-sized forms or the entire episode, so with some visual. And I've gotten a little better at that as time has gone on here. I've added some dissolves and stuff like that.
I was gonna say
it looks cool.
Your boy
You're
can
being
edit.
so modest. You're being modest, man. Those are fucking money. So good. Anything it's like almost like you got the visual, like the Google ads, like you know what everyone's thinking. Yep, and that boom, that image just pops up on that screen. It's got it dialed.
I'd love to know what that ticket stub looks like. Boom, there it is.
Wait, there it is.
Boom, how you like that?
Yeah, we're everywhere. We're all over the internet. Like the fact that if you can't find us on the internet, I'm not sure where you live or what rock you're under.
Yeah, Twitter, YouTube, Apple Music, wherever, Spotify playlists.
Sometimes when I feel like it.
Looking at you, Spotify.
Yeah. No, we kid. We're all over Spotify too. Playlists and podcasts and all that stuff. So, all right, we're gonna jump into the set list. We got a couple items that piqued our interest this week.
Yeah. So you said the show must go on. What were you talking about?
Corey Taylor announced the CMF tour. It's Corey motherfucking tour or something, I guess. Is coming to a Texas near you. Pretty much, it's like 5 Texas states in May, late May, which is nuts. And it's not just Texas. It's kind of, it's a bunch of places. Texas and Arizona, I think, and Tennessee, Illinois, a couple in Illinois. Yeah, he's all over. Iowa.
Like Midwest, a lot of Midwest states.
Yeah. But that's quick, man. That's 2 months away, right?
Is it? It's not solo. It's like him and his backing band.
Yeah, and the Cherry Bombs. Plus special guest, the Cherry Bombs.
Cherry Bombs. That's his wife, actually. His wife's performing act. I don't even know if it's a band. I think it's more of like a stage act, like a Las Vegas type thing.
That's cool, though.
Yeah.
So 2 months away. I got to believe it's been in the works. It's been in the hopper, and they've just been waiting for things to ease up a little bit. And now that things seem to be turning the corner. So it's probably like, all right, let's announce it. And that's the thing is like everyone's pent up. They don't need a lot of runway, I feel like. Like we've been saying, like people want music. We looked at the data last week of people hanging on to their tickets and people saying they're going to go to more shows. All those will sell out. And there were guidelines too, right? COVID
all
guidelines.
Kinds of guidelines. Yeah, they're regardless of state guidelines. So I guess I'm looking at you, Texas. COVID health protocols shall be strictly enforced by purchaser for all employees, patrons, artists, everything like that. So they're going to have to wear a mask, especially when they're not in their pod. Now, it sounds like they're going to have their own pod. So whoever they're there with in that spot, they can take their mask off, hang out, drink, whatever, enjoy themselves at the show. But as soon as they have to go to the bathroom and want to go get merch, you're putting that mask on and walking to wherever you got to go. And even in Texas where they're saying you don't have to do that. So that's interesting. They're doing temperature checks too, it looks like. Pretty crazy. Imagine having to get your forehead temperature checked to go to a concert. That's kind of nuts, though, right?
Yeah, it's not too far-fetched, though. I mean, it's been done. I go to the dentist, right? They do it there. Mm-hmm. It just made me think with this, like, there was clearly, like you said, Twan, a tour booked probably to coincide with the solo album that Corey Taylor dropped.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, like, what the ticket price was at that time when that contract was signed, and now that it has to be, the capacity has to be essentially split to, what is it, 25% probably of that venue capacity.
Oh, are these indoors or outdoors? Do we know?
I don't know. I'm looking right now on the website.
I feel like it's both.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think you're right, Nate. I think there's some indoor, there's some outdoors. It doesn't. They're gonna have the guidelines that they're putting in place trump whatever guidelines of where they're at. So, like, do you know the Marquee Theater in Arizona?
So that's obviously indoors, yeah.
Trying to see how much they cost.
So Nate, you were suggesting there'll be limited capacity. Obviously, if there's pods, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. So are they combining that ticket price as like a group ticket purchase? And what does that break down to? And what would that ticket price be prior to COVID going down? You know, is it probably 4x since then, just to kind of make up for capacity restrictions? I don't know. We'll see.
So a pod for this Arizona show, $104, but up to 6 people.
wait, is that per person? 105?
Yeah, 104.
104 per person.
I don't know if it's per person. 6 people limit in the pod, so I don't know.
Damn, no one's making money on that then.
So it must be 104 per person. That makes sense.
It's got to be.
And it looks like it's in a parking lot, so it does look like it's outside, even though it's Arizona. So I'm looking at the seating chart, and it is out in a parking lot.
Okay, you just answered my question then, because last time
Yeah.
Corey Taylor toured solo, I mean, given inflation and everything, I think the ticket was $35. So there you go. Now it's 105, you said?
Well, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to tell. I didn't want to click through to try to pay for a show in Arizona when I'm here in Maine, so maybe we'll never know. But yeah, at least you got a pod, and it looks like they're set up throughout the parking lot, distanced obviously. If it's $104 a person per pod, that's a lot of money. $600 per pod, and I don't know how many pods are there. 50. That's a pretty good chunk of change.
Oh, there'll be more than that. I mean, that's only 300 people.
Yeah, I know. I'm just looking at it quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I can't imagine if they're going the pod route that there would be indoor places that could handle enough people to make everyone's time worth it from a money perspective. But what do I know? I have no idea. I don't think Corey's in it for the money, so it wouldn't be his camp. I wouldn't think driving that.
Yeah, but that's where it gets complicated, right? Because his personal request on what he needs for an advance gets 4x, right? Or at least at the bare minimum, like a keystone price onto the customer. So if he's saying, hey, I need at least this, and it breaks out to like 25 ahead, which I think, like I was saying earlier, like last time he toured, it was cheap. It was like 25 to $35 a ticket. And now it's at 105. It's probably Ticketmaster like, hey, we got to make up for capacity. What do you want from me? So that better be a long show, like a 4-hour show.
Doesn't look like Ticketmaster.
Really?
Yeah, because you go through his website, and then it kicked me to another website that is not Ticketmaster. So
Okay.
I'm trying to figure
Interesting.
etix.com. So Lucky Man concert.
Wow.
Yeah, going. So they're not taking the cut that Ticketmaster's taking, obviously.
So much nerd insight here. Now that I'm looking at the venues, yeah, these aren't Ticketmaster venues. Like St. Louis Pops, that's probably like a
parking lot in St. Louis.
yeah.
But hey, I mean, if he were coming to a parking lot in Southern Maine in late May, I'd probably go. A pod outside, hell yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think this is probably a sign of what's to come.
Yep.
For sure.
You're
And
right.
I would assume most of these are outside, just given the locations. But there's some Midwest stuff in there too. So next couple of months, I mean, it's not like it's dead of the summer, but it's encouraging. That's my takeaway from all this.
It's mid to late May, so who knows? Or into June, I guess, depending on where it is. I mean, in Texas, that's not going to be an issue. It's probably going to be hotter than hell. But in Illinois, it might be nice. Who knows, right? The wet Mother Nature.
Yeah, events centers, Apollo Theater. Looks like some indoor stuff too. So who knows? I can't wait till like the layouts released or like video footage.
Yeah.
I'm very curious on this one.
There'll be that, and I hope they do something behind the scenes too. Obviously, if it's good, they'll release it. Maybe as an NFT, who knows? But if they do like a little video of putting it together and then showing, people getting scanned on their way in and then hanging out at their pods, it'd be cool to see like what it looked like for someone who can't go, obviously, because there's nothing near us, and there's nothing in California, Nate, so you're not going to get them either.
I saw that, yeah.
But interesting stuff. So keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on that too. Hopefully that goes off without a hitch. We're only 50 or so days away, 60 or so days away from the kickoff of that tour.
Yeah, in other news, Chevelle has recently kind of outed their label a little bit. Said their label has made $50 million, but in quotations, they've made no money. So not a surprise. We're pretty geeky here. Like, we know that the payouts aren't big, especially from a major label. But yeah, I guess they've fulfilled their record contract. So they're looking, they're kind of entertaining offers. We talked about NFTs last week, so I think there's opportunity there for sure. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this a number of times in this podcast. Water's wet, grass is green, and labels will find a way to fuck you. I think that's how the saying goes. I'm not surprised by this at all. I mean, I don't know if it's an exaggeration or just kind of a blanket statement to say we haven't made any money from them. Maybe that's true. I mean, if they have made any money, I'm sure it's not much at all, but it doesn't surprise me with label advances and the nature of their contract. Like, context is key to this. They signed with Epic in 95? I think that's what I read. I mean, they're not that old now, so they were kids. So they got exploited, I'm sure, and then if they re-up their contract, they were still pretty young. I have another take on this, but I'll save it to hear what you think, Tone.
So I think they probably signed a couple of deals that they didn't love, but they stuck around with Epic for quite some time. I mean, they put 10 records out with them, most recently last week. Neuradius, or I don't even know how to say it, but that came out last week, and I mean, it sounds like that did okay. I think it was in the top 10 for rock records released last week. So they're still viable as a band as far as that album sales go somehow. And then I'm sure the streaming numbers were decent for that too, just because if people are buying it, then people are also going and listening to it on their Spotify's and their Apple Musics. But they probably just signed deals that weren't great for them, looking back on it now, like a little upset that they did that. And in 2021 or 2020 even, we were talking a lot about artists owning their masters, and now they're maybe seeing, can we do that? Can we do our own thing, be indie, own our own stuff, and do something different? Maybe they do. Who knows?
Yeah, and you got to think, like, that contract was from the 90s. So, I mean, that's a completely different landscape. Like, you're expected to make certain sales based on those records on the RIAA and, Nielsen SoundScan, to just like have it work out in the artist's favor. Almost like, but that contract is like a car salesman contract. You're like, oh, it looks good on paper, like quick glance kind of thing. So, they're definitely eating their words now, but yeah, it's definitely evolved, right?
When you're 17 and you sign that or whatever, I don't know how old they are, but my assumption is they were probably right out of high school or close to it. But I'm sure they've signed another one since then. I can't imagine they signed a 10-year deal, a 10 record deal in 1995. That's not a good idea for the label.
It looks like they formed in 95, so I don't know when the punchline is they were young. Yeah. The take that I have on this when I heard it is like, you can't just take that headline for what it is. There's other intangibles the label brings besides, taking your money. And what I mean is, if they weren't on Epic, they wouldn't be as big as they were. They wouldn't be able to draw as big as they would. So it's like, I go back to the Shark Tank analogy where, yeah, Shark Tank, you get a deal in Shark Tank, you get exploited. But the reality is, rather than owning a big piece of a small entity, you own a smaller piece of a huge entity. You need the sharks to blow up. Otherwise, you're beating your drum kit in your basement still. So I'm not saying that's the case with these guys, but if they weren't on a major, they wouldn't have sold that many records anyway. You know what I mean? So I'm not defending the labels, because the labels exploited so many bands and it's a rigged deck, but they do have a purpose and they did their job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that. And I think that they probably don't. They're probably just looking at it through, hindsight and just being upset that they didn't make more money in the open market as an act with another label, maybe, because they were a pretty popular band. I mean, especially early 2000s. Mm-hmm. They weren't quite nu metal, but they kind of came in around the same time as more of a straightforward rock band. And I think they were Ozfest, right? They were on some big tours and got some big exposure, probably because they were on a big label. and they definitely reap some of the benefits of that. But they probably, looking back on it now, just wish they've sold a bunch of records. They feel like they probably deserved more monetarily because of it, which I
From
get.
the
It
label,
makes some
yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah, and to your point, Twan, I mean, like they get put on tours from Epic too, right? It's an ecosystem of connections.
Yeah.
And Epic's pretty notorious for this stuff, so it's not like a surprise that it's time. Like all the bad press and everything from the artist directly is always kind of ties back to Sony in a lot of ways, unfortunately. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was a 10 album cycle contract, because Incubus was tied into like an eight album tour contract. Pearl Jam, I think, had like a 9. So I think they get people early and just kind of get them while they're not really thinking clearly, and then they're just locked in, and then they either get dropped or they're just tied to that agreement for whatever it is. And Chevelle, I feel like was really just a gold rush for Epic to be like, hey, this is kind of a Tool like band. They're pretty big, so we should probably grab this since we don't have Tool. Kind of like Creed and Pearl Jam, right? Like, oh, this sounds similar. We know we'll sell some records because it's a riff off of what's already selling. It's a proven concept. So
Yeah, I could see that. You're right. That makes sense. They did get kind of bamboozled early and signed into a large one. Then why didn't we get more than one live album from them? Right? We've talked about that in the past. Or greatest hits, just to help satisfy those deals, those long deals to get out of them. Who knows, man? Early on, I love this band. Early on, those first couple of records are really good, I think. But I'm not sure. Nate, you were into them too back then, right?
Yeah, I feel like they kind of hit their stride like on their 3rd, 4th album cycle. Like the Clincher. What was that? What's the name of that record? I can't remember.
This type of thinking will do us in, I think.
Oh, nice. That's why I count on that memory. Yeah, I feel like they were on a good streak, and he got a Peter. Is it Pete Loeffler?
Yeah, yep.
The singer gets a lot of comparison to Maynard James Keenan's like type of song delivery and whatnot. But it's like, hey, like when I would see Chevelle, it was like seeing Tool in a theater. It was like it's a different band. The songs are still really solid. They're a tight band. They're essentially all brothers.
They at one point were all brothers, and then they kicked one of them out, I think, which is
wow,
crazy.
How are the family reunions there?
Yeah, right. That and well, maybe they aren't that bad because they weren't making any money anyway, so it didn't matter. I hear the Maynard comparison with Peter Loeffler. I don't hear the musical comparison, other than their rock bands. Tool is way more proggy rock-wise, instrumentally, but he definitely does have a delivery similar to kind of that higher Maynard register.
The one I didn't read the full article, but like one thing that's missing is like they're, I would assume they're doing well financially, just because they're not making money. There's all the ancillary income streams, but I think the kind of punchline here is just like, how many albums does it take to make money? You know what I mean? I know like every deal's different, but damn, like imagine selling 6 million copies and not seeing anything from that directly. Obviously, like we said, there's indirect benefits, but that's wild.
That is wild. Yeah.
That's a good question. I wonder the same. Like, do you have to go diamond to like feel like, oh, okay, cool, I can put some money away? Great.
This just brings us back to owning your masters, and more artists are going to be in charge of what they do content-wise on many different platforms, whether it be music release or the way that you are able to see them. We see Corey Taylor using, smaller firms to sell tickets, stuff like that. It's just going to be more and more of that, and less of the big dogs taking up all the money.
Yeah, I mean, the barriers to entry for a lot of this stuff is pretty small. If so, Chevelle, they're out of their deal. They could throw something up on SoundCloud and charge. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep.
The OnlyFans of music. We've talked about this before.
That's what's going to happen. More and more of it too. And I mean, it's already happening, but it's going to happen even more. And you're going to see some of the bigger players in those places than the household names that we've heard of before doing that stuff.
I got a question for you guys related to this. I'm just curious now. So if you have B-sides that you wrote during sessions under a record contract, is that stuff suspended under that contract, or does it become free will once the contract has been satisfied?
Stuff that was released?
No, B-sides, like stuff that was recorded in the sessions but not released.
That's a good question.
Right? Gets complicated because it's within the year contract set dates, so there's probably a lot of gold in there. So speaking of like making revenue post, whether it be NFT, limited item, press wax on B-sides from everything off of Seeing, what was the album with Seeing Red?
Wonder What's Next.
Wonder What's Next. You know, they probably have a full 2 albums worth of great material, just because they were on a high at that point. I wonder. That's something that we gotta figure out.
The
What do you
label
think,
probably
John?
owns that.
You think?
Be my guess. Yeah, the label probably owns that stuff. If it's been recorded and squirreled away at the headquarters, yeah, I would imagine they own it.
You're probably right. Then it'd get into proving it was from those sessions. But I'm sure it's cataloged somehow.
Yeah, the big dog knows it was here. We have you guys writing down names and stuff, and then we took all the paperwork and yeah.
I think the only way to know is to really get an actual contract and read it and just highlight a bunch of stuff and jump on the podcast and talk about it in depth, because it might have some stipulations like, yes, this was never released. It was never pressed. It was actually maybe never even recorded. But during that time, we paid Rick Rubin to produce you. So therefore, you're contractually obligated because of that alone. And it's like, fuck, man, I got some gold in the bank and I can't even touch it.
Yeah, maybe we ask Peter Loeffler to come on and explain his contract situation with us. It sounds like he's ready to talk. So
I was going to say, this makes me want to have someone at the label on the podcast to really understand how close are they. Like, I can't imagine there's someone at the label in the studio, like, for every day of recording an album, but there's some correspondence there. Like, do they see the sausage while it gets made, or do they just get the final product? So many questions.
Yeah, it's a good call. I wonder
what's next.
I wonder.
Exactly. We'll find something. We'll find somebody who knows the answer to this question in the near future, and hopefully report back.
That's what we do.
All right, main segment.
Main event.
Yeah.
The main segment is kind of a side project, isn't it, guys?
Side projects are key, man. You got to have an outlet,
Hell yeah.
So what are we talking about?
Side projects are key. In fact, maybe those B-side songs become side projects, and that's the out,
Wow.
Oh, I got this thing. I'm not going to tell anyone. Not even going to go in this recording studio. This is going to sit in this shoebox until I'm ready to kind of sway away.
What you're saying is Chevelle drops one of the L's, re-records it, and that's it. That's like their new song. It's a side project.
Exactly.
Chevelle with one L.
Are you the Segway king now, Nate?
He's back. Yeah. For those at home, we pass around a Burger King crown, and we just every week somebody gets to wear it because they're the Segway king. Right now it's Nate.
Oh, I love the crown. It's a little late, but had to sneak it in there because I thought of it like almost in real time. So yeah, side projects. What do you guys got, man? Who wants to go first?
So what we're gonna do is we each took a couple of side projects. So bands or artists that we don't have solos, right? It's all bands. You guys have bands?
I get bands. Yeah, no solos.
Yep.
Yeah, so bands of someone or people coming together, making music, but we didn't know about them first. Maybe we knew about something bigger beforehand, and then side project and or supergroup occasionally may have formed out of, some mutual connections, and we ended up with stuff we all liked, and we're gonna kind of bandy that stuff about. So who wants to lead off?
I'll go.
Sweet. I was gonna say, spin the wheel.
All right, you're not the king anymore. No more wheel.
No more wheel. The wheel every week with the wheel and Frank Maddox. God.
I'm gonna go with this one just in case you guys have it, because I only picked two. So this one is a side project that this side project dropped the first album in 2004. It was a departure from this artist's previous band. And it's interesting, this was the first of many side projects for this individual. And this individual came up in an episode with a guest a few weeks back. Any guesses?
Yeah, I know who it is. Nate, do you?
Thought I did, but now I don't.
Is it Head Automatica?
It is.
Daryl Palumbo.
Do you have that one?
Yeah. I don't, but that's a great call. I didn't even think of that.
Do you have it? Did you have it, Nate?
I do have that one, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's do it. Let's hash it out.
It's all good, yeah.
Let's tandem it. So, all right, little context. Daryl Palumbo, singer of post-hardcore band Glassjaw, came out of Long Island, New York. If you listen to us, you probably know the story. Big band for us collectively. I know we haven't jived on them too much. I mean, it came up in that Long Island episode, but we do love them. So they released albums in 99, 2002. After 2002, Worship and Tribute, from my perspective, Glassjaw was, I think they toured off it. I remember seeing them at a Warped Tour in 2003. But after that, it was kind of quiet. So then there's like rumors, I remember in the moment, rumors of a Palumbo side project, and an album drops in 2004. There was a couple singles released beforehand. I think, what was it? The Baby song?
Heart Beating Baby. Yep.
Beating Heart Baby. I think that was one of the first ones released. And it's like, if you know Glassjaw and you know that song, you're like, all right, this is different. It's like a dance pop, power pop type of thing. And Daryl and Glassjaw, kind of a cult following. So everyone's like super psyched for this thing. It drops, was it Decadence? Decadence drops in 2004. Howard Benson and Dan the Automator produced it. And for me, it's a fantastic album. I admittedly never really dove into Propaganda in 2006, and I know there's a unreleased Head album called Swan Damage that never saw the light of day. And that's kind of like almost the story with Glassjaw. It's like there's these rumored or these like, folklore albums that never see the light of day. So I'll pause there. Nate, you had this.
I had this too, man. That's funny. And when you said when we talked about it recently, I didn't know that we had. But I guess when we had, who did we have on that we talked about it?
Well, we just talked about Glassjaw with Brendan Garone, Long Island episode, briefly.
Oh, right on. Nice. Yeah, I chose this too just because it's such a standout side project. I mean, it's, like you said, a huge departure from Glassjaw. But as I was kind of geeking out on this today, it's kind of like the epitome of a perfect side project because it doesn't take away from Glassjaw. It just adds to Daryl's.
Great call.
Right? It's like Daryl's repertoire. It's like, this guy's amazing. He's got an amazing voice. It's interchangeable to essentially whatever genre. You go from like this metal band, or I don't know, what would you call Glassjaw? It seems like it's such a interesting project. It's almost genreless.
Post-hardcore.
Post-hardcore, yeah.
Yeah.
Something in that.
There's so many weird elements in there too. But this one, yeah, it's straight up new wave, power pop, just, I loved it too, man. Just the way you said it, I was like exactly how I felt. Like I didn't know what to expect. And when this presented itself, I was like, this is fucking great. It's definitely like a feel-good album. And his voice is just, it's so cool, Like if you're a fan of Glassjaw, you're like, whatever this guy does, it's going to be great. So I'm down. And I remember the show came to Maine, right? Came to the station.
Yeah, I was there. Yep.
Which was great because it was like Glassjaw was pretty big at the time. And they were playing theaters, which is big for that type of music. And then this came to the station, which is like this tiny club in Portland, which is no longer going. But the show was great. The album's great. I don't listen to it enough. And similar to you, Twan, I never even gave the other album a chance, but I really dug this album a lot. And revisiting it today, I was like, I remember why I liked it. It was like an immediate first listen. So props on Daryl. Just
I agree.
Take a risk.
I agree. I listened. You guys got me into this back then when it came out. And it's a testament to Daryl as a frontman that he could pull off both types of music, both genres, and they're both a little genre bending, but that he could do that with two separate bands, be in this post-hardcore-ish, really completely different vocally for him to jump into Head Automatica and do this kind of dance, glam, power pop type thing with new wave kind of roots almost. It was awesome. And you're right. Everybody was really excited. Oh man, Daryl's got a new thing coming out. What's it going to sound like? And I don't think anybody was really ready for that, but people were into it, which was cool. I mean, I know Glassjaw fans that were like, yeah, this is awesome. I know it's not what I expect from him, but this is awesome. And I was one of them.
Yeah. He seems like a guy that just can't sit still. Like he did that United Nations band with Jeff Rickley of Thursday. He did Color Film, which I never really listened to that, but he just is a guy that can't sit still. And all those bands are way different. Like United Nations is like like a throwback screamo band. But yeah, I feel like this came out on Warner Brothers. So obviously there was that connection there already from the Glassjaw days, because Worship and Tribute was on Warner Bros. And also in what this came out in 2004, so this was probably recorded in 2003. He was in his early 20s, so he's probably still figuring things out. Glassjaw at that point was a band for 10 years, and he was like probably just wanting to try something else. Interesting though, because we always like to think about the why, like why and how did this come about? Like how long was this in the works? You know, so many questions. Daryl, come on the podcast, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did they? So they put out Propaganda in what, 2006? You said.
Yep.
And there was a rumored album, but there's been nothing since.
Nothing since.
So we're 15 years, almost 15 years since that album dropped. And Glassjaw dropped a record like 4 years ago, something like that.
Yep.
Because there was a lot of break in between. You're right. There's always like kind of mystery around what was happening. Like,
Totally.
There was never just like 3 years in between albums and touring cycles, and like there were with a lot of bands of Glassjaw's ilk at that time, where they just kind of jumped in, put an album out, got big, put a major out, and put another major out, and then maybe disappeared or continued to go depending on how they did. Glassjaw wasn't like that. Head Automatica wasn't like that. It was like, here's a couple things, see ya. Maybe we'll see you again. Who knows?
Right. But kind of like Hum, like we could see a surprise Head Automatica album, like even a new one, not just Swan Damage seeing the light of day. There's just, you're right. There's mystery, there's intrigue, there's, I don't know. A lot of those Long Island bands, man, Crime and Stereo, Brand New, they're all just like fucking with us.
Something in the water.
Makes good pizza, New York.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was gonna say I'm confused too, just because what is Daryl doing, and where do all these projects come from? And I said earlier, like it doesn't take away from Glassjaw. It just kind of adds to, well, I guess more so just Daryl's repertoire. At the same time, kind of rewinding a little bit, maybe it does take away from Glassjaw, and that's why there's those awkward moments of silence, because to put out an album, Head Automatica, and then tour off it, that takes away from Glassjaw collectively.
Good point. Yep.
Right. So there's always friction with that release. So hard to say. Like you said, we'll only know until we get Daryl on here.
So I'm going to segue, but
Perfect.
Similarly into my first one.
Nice.
One of the guys, two of the guys in my first one here are guys that are often rumored and in and around a lot of other people's things. One of them is similar to the way we described Daryl. He's can't sit still. We've talked about him numerous times on this podcast. And one is from a band that Nate and I both have talked about being very early on in our music kind of love for music taking off. He was the rhythm section, one of the rhythm section for that band. So any guesses?
I know.
Yeah.
It's the Tom York Flea project.
No.
Is that a project? Or am I making that up?
I'm not sure.
I think I just made that up.
You might have.
I'm trying to guess tone, but I can't think of anything.
Well, all right. We've talked about.
Actually, I think I know now.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it them Crooked Vultures?
It is. It is them Crooked Vultures. Yes. Just needed an extra second.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Atoms for Peace, which is
Atoms for Peace. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Carry on.
So Josh Homme, John Paul Jones, Dave Grohl. I mean, for me, that's fucking awesome.
Wait, who are those?
I love yeah, right. Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, and then prior to that, Caius, and then he's in all kinds of other stuff, fame. John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin, and Dave Grohl, obviously Nirvana, and then Foo Fighters, and then a bunch of other stuff too. He drummed for Queens, and had his own band Probot there for a little bit, and he's just been all over the map too. They put out them Crooked Vultures in 2009, I believe. And they formed sort of on paper in 2005. And did you guys know they almost recruited Jimmy Page as well?
I didn't know that.
I know now.
I didn't either. Yeah. Which they didn't need him. It was an awesome record anyway, but that would have kind of blown the doors off a little bit. Have Homme and Jimmy Page going back and forth on guitar. That would have been pretty cool. Now I'm like, I wish that had happened. But yeah, they were put the one record out. Were kind of all over the place. They played Download Fest. They were toured. They were support for the Arctic Monkeys at one point. And then they did their own thing, and they sold. I think they were at Roskilde. They were at a bunch of different things in the 2009, 2010, 2011 range. And then poof, just as quickly as they became huge, they disappeared. technically they're not broken up. If you ask Dave Grohl, he'd tell you, yeah, we practice once every 10 years and we're coming up on a decade. So we'll see them practice together, get together again and put some music out. But yeah, this record was really cool. The one thing for me that if you listen to it, it sounds like another Queens record, right? It's pretty Queensy. You can feel the vibe, the desert vibe that you get from Queens and Caius before them. And for Josh Homme to be able to bend John Paul Jones and Dave Grohl to his will, that is what floored me about this project.
Ooh, great pull, man. I love this band. And I agree with pretty much everything you said just now, because it is very Queens of the Stone Age. It's basically Queens of the Stone Age 2.0. You got John Paul Jones, like you said, from Zeppelin. I did not know about Jimmy Page, which is crazy because he's the only member from Zeppelin that's still alive that's always pulling for a Led Zeppelin reunion, but he's the only one that doesn't ever do any kind of side project touring to essentially prove that he still has the legs to even do it in the first place. So John Paul Jones is doing that. Robert Plant tours solo, so you got to be up there to show that you can even make it happen. But yeah, man, I love this album. Saw them on the debut tour in Denver. Flew out to Denver just to see the show.
Damn.
And it was so good, man. It was one of those things where you're watching it, you're like, I know this is probably the first and last time I'll see this. And just seeing anyone from Led Zeppelin on stage in a club. Well, this wasn't a club, it was the Fillmore. Pretty big theater, but a theater nonetheless. To see three legends just fucking chugging along on stage was a sight to see. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And the album's solid, but I really do think it's essentially a Queens of the Stone Age album with some special guests is what it really kind of boils down to. And then Poof Gone. Right? Yeah. And Poof Gone, like you said, but that's Dave Grohl in a nutshell, right? He's working on different projects. He doesn't need them Crooked Vultures to be successful to tour on or to keep on that legacy. You can kind of just dip back to Foo Fighters, or if you really wanted to, you could just kind of reunite Nirvana. And then Josh, like Queens of the Stone Age.
I'm gonna call bullshit on that one without Kurt. I think that one will be kind of hard.
Yeah, well, they said they do it recently. Dave was.
They get together, but they're not putting Nirvana together for tour or any of that stuff.
Yeah, right. They could. It would be a bold move, and I think that's probably the why they haven't done it. But yeah, and I think John Paul Jones is essentially Zeppelin. I think he does a lot of scoring. Does kind of some like little other side projects too that we don't know a whole lot about. It's kind of like Europe centric. But Josh, obviously, like Queens of the Stone Age was taken off at this point, so he could just bounce back to that. But great pull. I didn't even think of this one. It's basically a super group, right? So there's like that fine line. Is it a side project or a super?
It's both.
Yeah.
While you were talking, Nate, it made me show regret in terms of, across the board with side projects. Because like in the moment you don't, at least I didn't think of like, all right, this is a side project and this is not just applying to them Crooked Vultures, but side projects are side projects. You know what I mean? You don't think, you have no idea how long it's going to last. And I think through this exercise and trying to think of bands, like it's typically short-lived, either one because it doesn't work, or two, the big leagues are pulling at them. So like Dave's going to get back to the Foos. Queens is going to do another album. So the fact that you saw them is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, how many tours did they do?
They toured pretty heavy for like a year and a half, 2 years, but then it was it. Like it was see ya. So
yeah,
I mean, and they were at like a lot of big tours in Europe and stuff. So it wasn't like they were all over the U.S. They were, but for a short amount of time. So the fact that you were able to catch them, Nate, is pretty badass.
Yeah, don't quote me on it, but I think they did basically 1.5 legs for a tour. Yeah. So it's basically like the tour, and then they did like a kind of a half tour to wrap around certain festival dates around the US. But like you said, mainly it was international. And I remember as it was unfolding, like when the project was announced, they would like play a show in Europe and then fly to Australia and do a gig, and then they fly to like Asia and do a gig. And the US tour was like only like 8 gigs, you know what I mean? So it was limited from the get-go. So when like the Denver show pulled up, where was I living at the time? New York, I think. No, Florida. It was like, oh, it's a selection of dates. Like Denver, I got a buddy there. Let's check it out. He was down.
Shout out to Bob, who might be listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Bob.
So, and I knew it, and we all knew it. It was like, this is going to be like a one-time thing based on that alone, that it was already a limited engagement tour date wise, let alone like, is this really going to last? So
it's a time and a place thing. Like it wouldn't hit the same now. I mean, I think John Paul Jones is like mid-70s now. Not that he couldn't, he could still do it, but
They may not tour, but they could put a record out.
yep. But in terms of tour, yeah, from a touring lens, yep. I think you hit it. You were in the right time, right place, or you put yourself in the right place.
And a couple just tidbits from my research for this today. Dave Grohl said, I think in 2019, that's the band I want to be the drummer for forever, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I mean, he was in Nirvana.
Right.
So pretty high praise for those guys. The other thing that I thought was funny, and you guys will know, the Dave Grohl Fresh Pots video?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, at the time, was recorded during the recording of them Crooked Vultures record. There was rumor it was recorded during the second session, but there was no second session because we don't have a second album. So
Not yet. Anyway.
Fresh Pots, baby.
You know what's cool about Dave Grohl? It really is nerd. I like to say nerdery squared, because he was drinking tons of coffee and like being a fanatic trying to get that shit done, because he was playing with John Paul Jones. His favorite band is Led Zeppelin. So imagine being him. He's so geeky, like, oh man, I'm gonna be a drummer for my favorite band and my biggest idol is John Bonham. Like, I'm gonna fucking make sure that this is the best music I've ever made in my life, basically.
Well, when he was in Nirvana, he was always like, hey, listen to Caius. So he also was big into the homemade stuff too. So yeah. All right, Twan, what's your second one?
All right, so round 2. I picked one, I don't know, some people might think it's a deep cut. It sold several 100,000 copies in the early 90s. It came from the ashes of one of the biggest punk bands on the planet, which is Husker Du. So Bob Mould of Husker Du, they wrapped up in, late 80s? So like right on I think there was a slight overlap. So I think this does still qualify as the side project. But again, time and a place. He put together the band Sugar. Do you guys know the band Sugar?
Heard of him.
I don't know, Sugar, no.
So again, Husker Du, punk band. He puts together Sugar in the early 90s, and I did some reading up on it. He was super impressed and super kind of in love with Nirvana at the time. So he wanted to kind of shift things up. And Sugar is not a grunge band. They're more of like your typical alt-rock radio, 90s alt-rock band. So They put out the absolute classic album, Copper Blue, which I would have never thought it sold multiple 100,000 copies. Because typically, if an album sells that, we're music nerds, I'm going to know about it. I didn't know about this album till probably 10 years ago. And it was just on maybe like a Pitchfork throwback list or something. And I was like, all right, it's a weird name. It can get lost in the shuffle in terms of marketing and all that. Oh, it's got the dude from Husker Du. All right, I'll check it out. But it reminds me of early Goo Goo Dolls. That type of vibe. And I don't know if I've mentioned the band Farside. They were on Revelation. But that, I don't know. There's parts of this, and people might disagree, but there's parts of Bob Mould in Sugar that kind of remind me of Eddie Vedder. Kind of have that thing. So maybe that's the grunge influence coming in.
I can hear that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's probably 30 years ago. He's probably late 20s, early 30s, and probably was just done with the punk thing. I don't know that whole story, but it makes sense given the context.
We've talked about Bob Mould fairly recently. He came up in our Foo Fighters conversation because he was on Wasting Light. He was on Rosemary, I think, on Wasting Light with Chris Novoselic too. So that might have been a big deal for him to get the invite and hang out with the guys from Nirvana / the Foo Fighters and
dude, you're right.
Make music.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And looking at it through this lens, that makes complete sense to me. I'm like, no wonder there was a little bit of worship there. And yeah, he's like, Dave Grohl calls and says, "You want to be on my record?" He's like, "Fuck yeah, let's go." I mean, that's cool stuff. All the dots are connected, right? Everything's connected.
So this dropped in 92.
92. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, as you were kind of glossing over the band's history, I couldn't help but think like the 90s in terms of side projects, I feel like it was maybe just more free. Like there's not a whole lot of pressure on, hey, you want to kind of shift to the side and do a little side project. No big deal. Going to play some clubs on the side. Still part of this big band or whatever. now I feel like there's just too much access to information. Like if you try to see a side project like them, Crooked Vultures, like, oh shit, it's 3 people from 3 different bands. I feel like that would have been played out different had it dropped in the 90s. So Dave's with Nirvana.
Yep.
Josh is with Caius, and obviously John Paul Jones is always from Led Zeppelin. But it becomes super group, post 2000. Everything's just like kind of like in your face after that. So this is an interesting thing to think about. Like 90s was still so organic. Like, hey, you can still kind of do your thing, no big deal. That's just something I was thinking about, especially with the band I'm going to bring up later.
Yeah, no, I don't know how big. Like, I know I think I read they sold 200,000 or 300,000 copies, which is pretty amazing. I can't. Did Husker Du ever do that? Like,
I don't think they did.
Like, I don't know. And like, what type of venues was Sugar playing? Like, in my head, I picture club band, but when you're selling that many records, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Copper Blue, if you haven't heard it, it's got a very like classic, typical '90s cover art. It's very basic. Great album though.
I'm excited to dig into that.
Yeah, all like college alt rock, '90s alt rock, '90s college radio rock. You'll love it.
Hell yeah, dude.
Towing you up.
I can do my second one. I feel like Nate needs to go though because he hasn't had his own.
I'm sorry.
He hasn't had his own full one yet.
Oh yeah, I was kind of riffing on that on Head Automatica. All right, cool.
Hop in, man.
Well, this actually makes sense because similar to what you said earlier, this is a hybrid supergroup, I guess. It is, in fact, Atoms for Peace, like you said, Twan.
Oh,
No
wow.
way.
Yeah, you had a little spidey sense going on there.
Clairvoyance. That's what we do here. Nerdvoyance.
Nerdvoyance. Tom York from Radiohead fame, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nigel, who's also a producer, and Joey, also a producer. So 2 producers in this group. And then Morrow, who is a band member for David Byrne's band. So it is a super group when you think about like adding producers to your rhythm section. But this ironically started as a solo project for when Tom York dropped The Eraser, and I think 06, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
He didn't tour off it, but I think he tried to. I think what happened from what I've read, kind of gathered, that he was rehearsing, but realized like, oh shit, I mean, this is a solo album. I can't perform all these instruments simultaneously. You know what I mean? So I guess I just won't tour on it. So he kind of revisited it later and recruited these people to kind of help him execute the songs live. So that's exactly what they did. So it is kind of a super group, but it's all original Tom York music. So I still throw it into the side project category, and it's pretty damn good. And like you said, good exercise on this side project thing, because even when this dropped, I'm a huge Radiohead fan and Chili Peppers, and I really like Tom York's solo album, the single Black Swan that dropped and everything.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, so fucking good. But I never checked out this solo album, this side project, which dropped in 2013 called Amok. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is basically this coming to full fruition on this side project with these members kind of helping him execute the songs that he had originally kind of put together. And I think the cool thing about doing this side project segment is there's all this music coming at us all the time. And even if they have members of bands that are famous or ones that we really adore, like you still kind of like miss them sometimes, whether it's the timing or whatever. Yep. And so I listened to it today and I was like, damn, this is actually pretty damn good. I had never given it the time of day, but ultimately it just kind of reminds me of a Radiohead album. So, there's that. But I think it goes back to like, hey, if you like the members of the band, it's nice to see them still, just kind of following their roots and just going for it anyway. And they played theaters for this. So little show regret there that, like you said, with them Crooked Vultures, I didn't see them on this tour, but it'd be cool to see them doing these songs.
Yeah. So was this, you're talking Radiohead like circa later, a little more digital, like King of Limsey type sound?
Exactly. Oh, even like Kid A going forward.
Okay. Yeah. So a little more digital, a little less plugged in like the Bends and OK
Totally.
Computer were. Yeah. Okay. See, that's where no, and that's because the Radiohead I like is the Bends and OK Computer. Like I like Kid A, I like Amnesiac in spots, but for me, I like the plugged in version. The Bends is my favorite Radiohead record. but that is a straightforward rock Radiohead record, and I like that version of them the best. Now that being said, I do like other stuff by them, and I have taken chances on some of the more synthy, more electronic-y sounding stuff. Like Black Swan from Eraser is that type of music. So
Yeah.
if you're telling me I like that, and then I would like this, then I'm down. I want to check it out.
It made me think, Nate, kind of channeling back to your Glassjaw Daryl, the Head Automatica thing. It's like, does it take away from Glassjaw? Well, Glassjaw is kind of this mystery. With Radiohead, they're kind of a mystery too, and I'm sure fans are happy to get something, but are they mad because it's not Radiohead? I don't know. Was this well received?
I mean, it's complicated because he put out the solo album and never toured on it, and then he put Atoms to Peace together and toured on that, and some of them are basically B-sides or restructured songs from that solo album. So it's kind of like convoluted. Is it a side project? Is it a solo album? It seems like, from what I gathered, especially listening today, that it's more of a side project ultimately, because I think he started something, wasn't able to fully execute on the live aspect of it, which is obviously vitally important to kind of just showcase what that music represents. And so, I mean, his solo album was 2006. He didn't tour on this till 2009. The album didn't drop till 2013.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's kind of been stretched out. So if anything, it's kind of an art project. And I don't think it takes away from Radiohead, but similar to what you're saying, like especially the later half of Radiohead's records, it just seems like a Radiohead record. So it's very much Tom focused and where his direction was going. And if Radiohead just kind of like goes along with it, is a different story. But I liked it. I'm not going to lie. It was the first time I ever listened to it was today. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But before the pandemic, I saw Tom York play the Observatory, State Theater type venue here in San Diego. And he dropped a solo album again, his second solo album, actually dropped under his name. And it was the same thing. It was like the same type of music, very instrumental, like weird beats, off track, kind of like, I don't know, just different sampling and so forth. And so I was like, okay, I think I just like Tom York. So anything he does, I'm down for. Whether it has to be called, Atoms for Peace or his name or Radiohead, it kind of all just ties. I mean, at the end of the day, like, he is Tom York from Radiohead, so it's going to sound like it, right? So
I have a thought. This is a general side project, but it applies to this. These side projects, what outweighs one more than the other? The fact that they already have a massive fan base, they have a leg up, or are they handicapped because of that? Because people are expecting something, and there's a good chance they could be let down. You know what I mean? It's just one of these dynamics that, like, it's a huge risk for an artist to take, especially a guy like Tom York.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's probably, if I was him, I'd just be like, I'm going to do what I want. You know what I mean?
It's a good question, and I think it's case by case, right? I think it depends on if you're, like, in the case of Head Automatica, Daryl Palumbo, you're okay with him being completely different than what Glassjaw sounds like in that aspect. But with another artist, you might not be. You might be like, nah, give me more of the same, but with different people, under a different name. I like the same. So, and there are probably people that were like that with that too. With them Crooked Vultures, you're like, okay, this is more supergroup than side project, but it is side project because they're all doing other things that they're bigger for. And it didn't sound like Led Zeppelin or Foo Fighters. So, if you're a Queens fan, you're like, yeah, I'm in. This is great. Right. So I don't know. It depends. It really just depends.
Yeah, I think it is case by case because it's like Daryl is a great example. Like Glassjaw and Head Automatica are polar opposite types of music. So it's almost like if he had this material for Head Automatica and presented it to the guys in Glassjaw, and they were like, dude, fucking no way. Well, then he has to make a side project. It's like he wants to get it out. If I was an artist, I'd want to get it out somehow.
Dashboard Confessional, ring a bell?
Yeah. Right. For Tom York, on the other hand, though, it gets complicated because it's like I just said, like this solo album and Atoms for Peace collectively sound like Radiohead albums. So is he pissing off the band at this point? Like, hey, this could have been a Radiohead album. Or are they like, hey, we don't like those songs, go make it a solo album or side project?
Yeah, so many questions. Like we got to know, Tom. Come on the pod.
Yeah, Tom, you can come on too. Open invite.
Yeah, he's a B-lister. We can get him on.
Wow, maybe not now.
Just kidding. Obviously kidding. We're always joking on here.
He's out of our league, bro.
He's out of our league. right now.
Right now.
Just right now. All right. Ready for my last one? I think we're only going to do 2 each, right? So this band, when this band became a thing, its frontman said, "My other band is now my side project. This is my main focus." His other band was one of the biggest nu metal bands in the history of music. We've talked about them before. Nate and I ride for them pretty hard.
West Borland.
I know.
We're talking about West Borland, and I'm not talking about Big Dumb Face. I'm talking about Blacklight Burns.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I knew Nate would be down with this one. Yeah. Blacklight Burns, West Borland's project that he put together around the early 2000s when there was some unrest with Limp Bizkit. He'd been hanging out a lot with like Danny Lohner of Nine Inch Nails, touring fame, a few others, Josh Freese, who he's boys with still to this day, I believe, and just started kind of writing his own solo record. Got input from those guys, got input from Trent Reznor, and put out Cruel Melody in 2007, I believe. Yep, June of 2007. So that record is the one that I listened to and spent the most time with. Listened to again today with my wife while we were making dinner. She wasn't opposed to it, which was kind of cool. I was like,
That's a win.
Kinda,
That's a win.
you kind of into
That's
this.
a win.
Like, yeah, it's a little heavy. It's a little dark. It's not super happy, and she's not typically down with that stuff. But she was like, the music of this is actually really good. And I was like, I know, because it's kind of a Nails knockoff. I don't know. In the moment, I didn't think that, but listen to the opening track, Mesopotamia. And I'm like, this sounds like a Nine Inch Nails record. Like the distorted guitar spots, and I'm not shocked that Danny Lohner and Josh Freese had a hand in this. You know what I mean? And that he like leaned on Trent a little bit to ask us, how do I be a frontman type stuff. So that record's the one I spent the most time with. He's put out a couple others. The cover album I never listened to, and then the one that came out after that I didn't really like. But this record is fucking great, Cruel Melody. So, and it's funny, he did say when he left Limp Bizkit in the early 2000s that Limp Bizkit's my side project. This is my main deal now, which is kind of funny because he left this like 3 times to go back to Limp. So he didn't mean it, obviously.
So dumb question, or maybe it's not dumb. I'm trying to. He sings in this too, right?
He's the front man.
He's the front man. Interesting. I've never heard them. I know the name. Never heard them.
I think you'll like Cruel Melody. I think you'll like it. But and I don't always say that about stuff like, oh yeah, it's when you like this and that, whatever. Now this one I think you'll actually like.
Yeah, looking at the similar artists on Spotify, I can kind of pin it in my head that it's in that Nails filter-ish maybe, that type of
similar.
Okay.
Similar, yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I'll check them out.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of like the gothy type thing, which, I mean, Borland with the Biscuit, he was always the goth one, right? With like the makeup and like just like the weird shit. But awesome pull. Huge fan of the band. And like you said, Tone, like we both were, and I still am, especially this record. I ride for this record all day. And interestingly enough, like you said, Josh Freese was on here. What was the other guy you said?
Danny Lohner.
I always go by his stage name, which is like the Wren Holder, which is like a Perfect Circle song,
Yep.
right?
You know what band he was in, Nate?
What's that?
Danny Lohner. You know what band he was in?
Not sure.
Methods of Mayhem.
He's in Methods of Mayhem.
shit.
He was in Methods of Mayhem.
We talked about them. We talked about them pre doing this as a joke. That's fucking great that they made their way in.
It's who you know, not what you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I love this band, and I saw them twice for this tour, or I think twice for this touring cycle.
You're probably
both
in New York, right?
Florida actually.
You're in Florida,
and both were like, it was like a bar. It was like, 100 or 50 cap, like tiny, but it was cool. And I remember going because I was obviously a Biscuit fan, so I was like, oh, cool to see Wes play a bar down the street from where I live. Great. And I like really liked the band, so I was like, oh, sweet. And then when I read up on what you just mentioned, like all the people on the album, like, oh, this is actually supposed to be a super group.
Yeah, kind of.
But doesn't sound like they had the availability to tour on it. So what was a bar show for me, 50 cap, could have been a super group theater type touring act or even an arena if they wanted to keep it going. And that's what the production sounds like. That's what the songwriting's like. I think Wes has always been just a absolutely amazing musician. Carries Limp Bizkit, gotta say. Huge fan of his work. So when he finally, ponied up and did a project that was just untouchable. I mean, Big Dumb Face, I don't really know how I feel about that band, but Blacklight Burns is just solid. And I think it's because it's him, but he has, those other people in the band, at least to record the album to make it what it is. And so unfortunately they didn't tour with it, but with those members, but I still thought it was great. And I haven't listened to it in a long time, actually.
I hadn't either. It's still really good.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Big Dumb Face. That's I'm gonna revisit Big Dumb Face, and I'm gonna check out Blacklight Burns because I don't think I've heard Blacklight Burns.
I agree with Tony. I think you're gonna like it, man, because it was like a first listen. It's not like I gotta be in the mood. It's like it's just good, I think. But
yeah,
we'll see.
And it's weird to hear Borland sing because you don't think of that at all with his music, but he obviously is the front man for this band. A couple funny tidbits. I told you that when he formed Blacklight Burns, he was like, "Yeah, Limp Bizkit's my side project." Well, he left to go back to Limp Bizkit in like 2004, a couple of years into this, or a year into like the formation of it, and then again in 2009, and then they put out Limp Bizkit put out Gold Cobra. So he's always gone back to LB just because I'm sure that's where the checks are cashed for the most part. But it makes sense. And around the formation of this band, again, he was hanging out with Danny Lohner, who toured with Nine Inch Nails a lot, Josh Freese a little bit too, and Trent asked him to be a touring guitarist for Nine Inch Nails. So he was almost a touring guitarist for Nine Inch Nails, and also Maynard and the company asked him to tour with a Perfect Circle around that time too, and he turned both of them down to do this. So think about that for a second. Like Borland is a touring guitarist for those two bands. Like shit.
Wow, that sounds like a Dave Grohl turning down Tom Petty for Foo Fighters type situation,
right.
But
Yep.
Maybe didn't play out the same, but could have. I feel like this was a timing thing. 2007 was a weird year to put out something like this, maybe. But man, he would have been killer in Nine Inch Nails. That would have been great.
This makes you wonder, like, I don't know. I remember in the moment, like Wes has a love-hate relationship with Limp Bizkit, but it makes me think of like how many other musicians are kind of stuck in bands in that their only outlet is these side projects. Like Wes, he did Big Dumb Face, which is almost like a parody metal band, if I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then to do Blacklight Burns, it's just like it makes sense why he left. Clearly, like the story plays out how it makes sense. The story checks out.
He was in a side project with his brother too, Scott, I think, for a hot minute around the same time. So
I think it was Big Dumb Face. He was in Big Dumb Face with his brother.
Okay,
maybe
yeah,
another one.
And it dissipated, but they had gotten back together too. Like, not to get too into the weeds on Big Dumb Face, because whatever. But to your point, it's a thing where like, okay, I'm cashing my checks with Limp Bizkit, but I have other things I want to do. I want to try different avenues and work with different people, and this was his outlet. And I mean, go listen to Cruel Melody if you haven't. If one person listens to it, let us know. Like, hit us up, because it's a really good record. If you're into kind of Nails and Nails adjacent, it's probably not as heavy lyrically as some of the Nails stuff, but it's musically it's similar and really good, especially more recent Nails stuff, like Nails around this time with Teeth and stuff after that.
Yeah, I think Blacklight Burns is a perfect case study on, again, it doesn't take away from Limp Bizkit, and it definitely showcases what Wes is capable of, which is like he's an amazing guitarist, but he's actually a pretty damn good songwriter too, So if he presented this music to Limp Bizkit, it would never work. So he's probably sitting on this like amazing music. He's like, shit, I could just keep on stockpiling it, or I could go for it. So I think he kind of did the Dave Grohl Foo Fighter thing. Like, I'll try it. Hopefully it works. If it doesn't, at least I did it. And we liked it, I think execution wise, it could have been bigger had it had the proper promotion and infrastructure to support it. I think it actually probably could be an arena band, to be honest. That's how good it is, I think.
Had they been all able to get together to tour with the group that put the music together, I think you're absolutely right. Because
Totally.
They did.
Yeah.
They had a couple songs on soundtracks, like the Underworld movies.
Yep.
They were on that. They were on a video game at the time, so like there was some promotion, but they, the live show probably wasn't what he wanted it to be, because he couldn't bring those guys with him.
Yeah, you think he'd have all the money in the world to make it a success, but I remember reading something about Wes, and during like Limp Bizkit's like high period, he invested all his money that he was making. Like we just talked about, record labels not paying much. They were not diamond level, but they were selling some serious records. I guess he invested all his cash earnings into the stock exchange, which crashed in 2001 with 9/11. He lost everything. That's what I read.
Oh, it sucks, man.
So
Damn.
yeah,
Because they were massive. Limp Bizkit was massive. He made some money
Yeah.
there. Nate, give us your last one.
All right, cool. I was gonna say like Head Automatica was one of my choices, but I did have a backup. It's like an honorable mention actually. Is kind of goes into our dialogue on, does this take away from the main cash grab band, or does it stray from it? And this is a great, again, another case study on how it doesn't play out for both sides. The band is Echobrain. It's Jason Newsted of Metallica, and he started Echobrain in 2000. So it was actually when he was still in Metallica. I think similar to what we've been talking about on here, which is basically passion project, doesn't mean much. He's got some friends, going to put out a record, no big deal, maybe play some bars, whatever it is. Caused some pretty serious friction within the Metallica camp. James Hetfield was not a fan. He actually said, quote, when someone does a side project, it takes away from Metallica. It's basically saying, fuck you, don't do this. And ultimately had Jason leave the band, quit the band. So clearly he was very passionate about seeing this through. And again, never really listened to it. Love Jason, love Metallica. Checked it out today. And it's good, It reminds me of kind of a hodgepodge of like Queens of the Stone Age, to be honest, and Soundgarden. Kind of has elements of both. Definitely softer than Metallica. Doesn't have the metal roots throughout from what I listened to. And it was good. I'm not really sure why James felt threatened by it. It definitely doesn't take away from Metallica from the listener. This is obviously my opinion. But yeah, I finally checked it out. It's just one of those things like, man, I can't believe this almost broke up a band of Metallica stature, but ultimately just got him kicked out. And they don't tour. This band, Echobrain, has also broken up. So it's kind of, did it make sense? Did it work in his favor? I don't know. He's not in Metallica anymore. And probably like the little biggest nerd tidbit of the whole thing is the fact that it was actually recorded right here in Encinitas in San Diego.
He's still cashing those Metallica checks, I think. I think we recently read that. So I don't think it didn't hurt him. I mean, sure, he's living off him.
When did he leave? When did he get kicked out of Metallica?
He didn't get kicked out, actually. He actually, from what I've read, he quit in 04.
04.
So
okay.
Kind of like when they were making the documentary, Some Kind of Monster, and there was a documentary on how.
So he wasn't part of Saint Anger?
I think he was, and he left. He left during the recording sessions.
Really? I didn't.
No,
he was wrong.
He left before. No, because they got the dude from Suicidal Tendencies, right? Robert Trujillo. Yeah.
Good for him for leaving before Saint Anger.
Right.
That I kind of see both sides of it. I'm not sure that I would be like, fuck you, don't do it, like a la James Hetfield, but I kind of see both sides of that. Like, yeah, hey, we're massive, and there's a lot of money that comes out of the Metallica machine. There's been stories fairly recently about how much money comes out of the Metallica machine. So for him to be like, you're taken away from that, and that's affecting my bottom line, I could see why that might be a thing. At the same time, if you don't love what you're doing, you want to do something different and try something new, there should be some room for that too, right? So I don't know. It's tough.
Oh, yeah. When you were saying that, Nate, I believed it because it's Metallica and we know the egos and whatnot. But at the same time, it caused some friction and he left. And that's what you're going to get with a big band like that. I've never actually listened to this band, but I remember I do have, and I probably still have it. I'll have to dig it out. I used to have an Echobrain sticker that I got at Bull Moose. We mentioned Bull Moose on this podcast.
Nice.
So I'll have to dig through my nerdery. I think I still have it. I don't know if I knew that he was in the band. It's a weird name. I mean, it's a bandicap name. I mean, am I going to go check out a band named Echobrain?
No.
Clearly, the answer is no, because I've never listened to him.
And you didn't. You and I are not the only ones who felt that way.
Right.
Clearly. And also, Nate, you've brought them up before. Like early on. Yeah, early on. We had a Metallica conversation early on, and I remember you bringing this, not this whole story, but pieces of this story up. So my brain is like, I think I've heard this before. Not in a bad way.
I left some breadcrumbs. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I'm thinking about the West Borland thing. Like, had Echobrain come and toured and played some small venue and wherever I was living at the time, I probably would have checked it out more, and definitely at the time. But like you're saying, like the band I like is Metallica. So unless it is a live show I might check it out eventually. And here I am, checking it out in 2021, way late. And I thought it was good, but I could see why it didn't work out. Maybe it just wasn't as solid. But James being like threatened by the music is unfortunate, because it's clearly just someone that wants to put something out there and has nothing to take away from Metallica, other than, like we were saying earlier, like maybe touring schedules and contracts and opportunities that are going to be missed to kind of support this project. So there's always that too.
That's what it is, because like the listenership, I'm sure there's crossover, but it's a whole different style of music. But I just looked on Spotify, 1,200 monthly listeners, so it didn't take off. It didn't take off at all.
Do you guys want to know how much Metallica makes a year?
Collectively, as the machine?
Yep.
50 million?
Nate, you got a guess?
I'd say it's somewhere in that range too. I'm going to say
68.5 million
No shit.
collectively a year. And that was in 2019. So obviously 2020 I thrown out the window. But yeah, so I can see James Hetfield's guy. What are we doing here?
Right.
You want to go start Echobrain? And in 2004 they weren't making 68.5 million a year, but they're probably making 20 in 2004, right? I mean, at least. So yeah.
Oh,
what the
my
fuck,
God.
bro? What are you doing?
I'm laughing so hard because can you imagine that conversation? Like, so I'm trying to think. 2001, was that? What era of Metallica was that?
2001. Are we getting like Load and Reload?
Yeah, we got the Mission Impossible soundtrack.
It was after Reload,
I
before Saint
Disappear.
Anger. Yeah, imagine that. Your
were big
bassist
then.
comes to you and says, "Hey, I'm going to start a project called Echobrain." Are you kidding? What?
And it won't get in the way of Metallica stuff. We'll do stuff on the weekends, guys. Don't worry about it.
Nights and weekends.
Yeah. So I can see a little of that from James's side. We're like, hey, we're massive, and you want to go do what? Like, come on, bro. Really?
It's tough. I guess it takes, tragedy to be able to succeed with something else. Like Foo Fighters is kind of like an anomaly when you think about it. Victim of circumstance, I guess.
Yep. We didn't even shit on Lars in that segment, guys. Good job.
I wanted to.
My tongue's bleeding. Sorry.
I know. Yeah, we tried really hard not to. All right. I think that's a good spot to stop, right?
Yeah.
So side projects. I got a couple more actually that I didn't bring up tonight, so I'm excited to bring those up again down the road. But hey, hit us up on the socials at Potty on Twitter and Instagram. Email us pottyslavepodcast@gmail.com. We're around. We love this stuff.
Yeah, that was fun. And if you can think of some side projects that you either think we should deep dive in the future or just to check out, maybe you have some deep cuts, post them on our socials. We'll have this episode up on Monday. So appreciate everyone checking us out.
Yeah, good call. Side projects part 2. Can't wait to get there and get some insight from whoever's listening on stuff we maybe glossed over by mistake, didn't even see. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy. Cheers.
Peace, potheads.